League of Legends recently came out with a bunch of announcements of new video games that are going to be totally different from their team-based 5v5 MOBA. One of those games was recently released, and that is the League of Legends RPG, The Ruined King. I played The Ruined King, and it's good. It's a good game. It's fun, solid, turn-based RPG. You got a good plethora of characters that are all pretty fun to play as, that all have their own unique mechanics. You run around a big pirate city called Bilgewater. You run around these evil demonic islands called the Shadow Isles. And that's about it. You gotta stop a evil king from coming in and destroying the pirate city. And that's basically it. The game's fun. I will say the biggest downside of The Ruined King is that it is buggy. These bugs didn't really show their head until like the 20-hour mark, and it's a 30-hour game. But inevitably there were moments where my controller wouldn't work. Like, I could target my allied units with my controller, and I could hit buttons, but I couldn't target my enemies. That was pretty frustrating. And that happened a couple of times. And then there's a few things, like I opened up like a menu, and then the menu wouldn't close no matter what. Stuff like that. Sometimes a lot of the inventory gets glitched up also. And then there's even a moment, I think during the final boss fight, my character died and I resurrected them, but it still said my character was dead. And so my character was just invincible for the last third of the final boss fight. So yeah, the game's got some problems but with bugs, but again, they're a little bit few and far between. And overall, the game is relatively solid. Moving on, gameplay is turn-based, and every character has their own unique passives and auto attacks and abilities that you can upgrade, as well as runes that you can upgrade, and you can enchant different pieces of gear to sort of build a character and like customize them in the way you want. Like, some characters can be healers, or they can be damage dealers, or they can be tanks, and you can kind of make them play how you want them to play, generally speaking. Though, to be fair, there are like 2 main DPS characters, 2 main healer characters, and 2 main tank characters-ish. Alawi is both a tank character and a healer, which does mean that there's a little bit lopsided in terms of DPS with like Misfortune, Pyke, Yasuo, and Ahri. Anyway, moving on. Combat also has this pretty neat thing called the lane system, which is fitting because it's in a League of Legends related title. You have the speed lane, which makes the moves come out faster, but they are less effective, and you have the power lane, which is the moves are slower, but they are more effective. And different lanes can also have different additional effects based off how you upgrade your characters. Lanes are really cool. This laning phase also allows you to avoid hazards or get buffs, and I think that actually makes combat feel a lot more dynamic and enjoyable than it otherwise could be with a standard turn-based RPG. You spend a lot of your time running around an overworld or solving puzzles or things like that, and then you also have these dungeons, which are pretty solid. Dungeons full of enemies, as well as additional puzzles and hidden secrets. Characters have dungeon abilities that you can use in the overworld or in dungeons that allow you to snag secrets or continue to progress onwards, which are pretty good. Like I said before, the game does take place in 2 major locations, Bilgewater, the pirate city, and then the Shadow Isles, which are like the zombie ghost ruins. Shadow Isles has teleportations and fast travel, which gets you from area to area relatively quickly, and Bilgewater doesn't. Bilgewater is smaller than the Shadow Isles, however, you can only fast travel at certain spots to one of 3 locations. And it gets a little inconvenient, especially on return visits to the city, when you have to get from place to place. You end up doing a lot of walking in Bilgewater, and it can get pretty tedious, especially if you have to find like items or trying to do side quests or something. I'll say here, I just think the art design is really solid and the music is really solid. The game opens with sort of a CGI-esque trailer, but you won't see anything like that outside of the opening again. You get a lot of these like cartoon comic book panels, which I think are fine. I actually think the voice acting is a lot of heavy lifting here. All these characters are performed very, very well. And I think all things considered, they end up really bringing to life these League of Legends characters. Speaking of which, we can just go into the story. The story is pretty solid. The general plot is Gangplank, who used to be the pirate king of Bilgewater, but he had murdered Misfortune's mom and Misfortune had risen through the ranks of Bilgewater and finally murdered Gangplank and has become queen of the city. Nearby islands of Bilgewater are the Shadow Islands, and they every couple years release the Ruination or the Black Mists or whatever, where a bunch of like zombies and stuff attack. However, this time around, Gangplank actually like survived. He didn't die, and he sneaks away to the Shadow Isles, and him and Thresh, he's like one of the evil lords of the Shadow Isles, team up to retake Bilgewater. And from then, the story kind of starts. Alawi is a priestess who is trying to stop, the Ruination from happening. Misfortune is after Gangplank, and Ahri shows up halfway through the game. She's there for her own personal reasons. The main two characters of the story are Misfortune and Alawi, but Ahri ends up becoming very heavily tied in with the plot of the game, to the point where I think she also becomes a main character. The other three characters, Braun, Yasuo, and Pike, are very much side characters, which I think is fine, because I think the character development they have for Misfortune and Alawi and Ahri are all really good, and I think they have a really solid story between the three of them that ends up becoming pretty enjoyable. I like the story, I like the characters. The plot ends up being really good. It's very small scale in that sense that it is kind of just the fight to defend Bilgewater. It's just pirates versus skeletons and zombies, and I think that's fine. I actually like that a lot. I will say the game definitely slows down near the end and the final third of the game. You're definitely progressing very quickly, and then you kind of hit this point where you're just kind of stuck in the Shadow Isles for a very long time. Another issue I ended up having with this game at the late game point, you hit the level cap, which is level 30, pretty naturally. The issue with this, though, if you wanted to do side quests or pick up any of these hidden items, like your extra ultimates or legendary weapons, you gotta run around the world. You gotta run around the overworlds a lot. And at this point, when you no longer get experience and you don't really need the materials that drop off of enemies, it just feels pretty pointless to have to fight a bunch of know-nothing enemies that don't give you anything. It really makes the game start dragging. Yeah, so just like overall, to like run it back one more time, the gameplay is really fun. I like the lane system. I like that the characters are very customizable and they all feel really independent and unique from one another. I also really like the dungeon layouts and the puzzle solving. I thought that was pretty good. I like the art direction. I like the voice acting. I like the music. I like the little extra stuff you can do with like skins or fishing. I like the smaller scale setting, that it's really just sort of focusing around these Shadow Isles and this one pirate city. I think that's pretty good too. The downsides are, I think the third act is a little sluggish. It can definitely drag on. I definitely also think that combat can be a little too easy. I played this game on Veteran, which is equivalent to hard mode, and the game still is pretty easy at moments. And then I would also say that a negative point is that the game is buggy. There are plenty of bugs in the game that can cause soft locks or hard locks or just like be really inconvenient. But honestly, I didn't find any of the bugs to be that intrusive. Overall, I would give the League of Legends RPG Ruined King a 7 out of 10. I think it's a really fun RPG that made me like some League of Legends characters and the League of Legends universe, which was something I wasn't expecting. And if those bugs get ironed out, then yeah. Overall, just a really good time and pretty enjoyable. Alright, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one, and take it easy.